Every city and state run by demon rats inevitably turns into a third world shithole. New York City was a great place to visit many years ago, when drugs and crime wasn't so rampant. You can find anything you can imagine in New York City, but unfortunately these days you can find everything you don't want as well. How anyone with the big bucks can stand to live there and consider it prestigious is beyond me. If money was no object, I'd live as far away from any city as I could, in the mountains, among the trees, nature. Fuck a bunch of sushi and medallion cabs, pollution, noise, subways, and shit turds everywhere. The following video is reposted as a public service.
It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the gigantic Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all the people, not just to the educated upper class. Because the desire for freedom is classless. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind and in the human soul. Today we face another time of turmoil, of anger, and very, very serious partisan division. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done best in the past and see if we can't use some of that to help us now. We understand that they created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any other country on earth. They weren't perfect men and women, and neither are we. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Welcome back to Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. And today we have an interview with a very, very distinguished hero. Truly a hero. I don't use that lightly. This is a man who served his country in the military with great distinction, served the city of New York as probably its best corrections commissioner ever, reduced crime 90% in the prisons. I'm not kidding you, 90%. Go watch 60 Minutes. And was police commissioner during the worst attack on the city of New York ever, or at least since the War of 1812. And in addition to bringing us through that, he did the remarkable task of reducing crime after 70 years or 6.5 years of crime reductions when people thought it couldn't be reduced anymore. He reduced it probably by the biggest percentage that we had in that period of time. So this is an exceptional man who then volunteered to serve in Iraq after he had retired, and we began working together. I'm talking about Bernard Kerik, who has been honored by the Queen of England, by virtually every law enforcement organization in the world, and was a street-level police officer, which is one of the reasons I made him police commissioner, because he understood the whole department, right down to the street. And I think this is really the best person you could talk to about something everyone is concerned about, which is the condition of New York City. I can't go anywhere in this city without someone stopping me and saying to me, "Mayor, what's going on? Can you run again? These are people who come up to me and say, we hate you because you're representing Trump, but you should run again. It's a really strange thing. So here's Bernie, who I think you all know is one of my good friends as well. And Bernie, I want to ask you your general view, and then we'll go back, of the view of the city as it is today. I mean, no one knows it much better than you do, and from all aspects. What's your view of the city?
Well, you know, I have the privilege, if you will, or the distinction of being in the NYPD as a cop from '86 to '94 when you took over as mayor, seeing, you know, the crime, the violent crime, the murder, the filth, you know, how the city was run. And I've also had the distinction of watching that renaissance under you, under your command, where the city changed. Now, since Mayor Bloomberg took over several years ago, I've watched the programs and policies that we put in place.
I think you mean Mayor de Blasio.
De Blasio, I'm sorry, de Blasio. I've watched the policies and programs diminish, policies and programs that we put in place back in '94 to 2002 be completely disregarded. And if you look around the city now, you see homeless like we haven't seen in 25 to 30 years.
Yes.
We see squeegee guys at the Lincoln Tunnel, Holland Tunnel, you know, washing people's windows, spitting on their windows, demanding money. We see quality of life diminishment that we haven't seen in 25, 30 years. And it's basically as a result of the mayor's leadership, Mayor de Blasio's leadership. And I want to stress, it's not really leadership. You know, he has handcuffed the cops. He has precluded them from getting out and enforcing the law. And you know, Mayor, here's the thing that I think, not only New York City, but all over the country, whether it's Chicago or Baltimore or Milwaukee or any of these big cities, that they have not been able to clean up those cities, and they continue to have poverty and violent crime. When you came into office in 1994, you were adamant. Nobody's going to come to live, work, visit, or go to school in a place where they're not safe. Nobody's going to open a business in a community where mothers are putting their babies in bathtubs to prevent them from getting hit with random gunfire.
Remember Maria Hernandez?
That's right.
I mean, certain people stand out. Maria was in Brooklyn. She was a beautiful woman, wonderful husband. The drug dealers ran her block.
Right.
They'd get picked up. They'd be back in 4 hours.
That's
They
right.
were intimidating her kids, and she turned them in. And then one night, they came by her house and shot her dead.
Right. And that's the way it was.
It's like living in a communist or like a dictatorship.
Right.
For them, it wasn't New York.
Right. And that all changed in your 8-year period, in your 8-year tenure. And what we've seen now is we've seen a return to what I would say are the bad old days before you took over.
So we're going to talk about the broken windows theory. We'll talk a little about stop, question, and frisk, and then ultimately CompStat. So let's begin with the broken windows theory, which is very heavily debated. Explain to people what basically that is, what the theory of that is. It's really pretty simple, and I don't know why the left gets all upset about it. It comes from two professors, one from Harvard, Professor Wilson and Kelly.
You know, in layman's terms, I like to put it to people like this. If I purchased a brownstone in New York City, say down in the Village, I buy a brownstone for $5 million. I put all my investment into that brownstone. I have young children. I don't want to walk out of that brownstone in the morning and have somebody defecating on the street, urinating in my hallway, painting the side of my building with graffiti. And up until the time you took over in 1994, that was allowed. That stuff was allowed. It was commonplace. The cops, they took no action. They didn't think it was a real issue because, you know, leadership comes from the top. And you were very clear when you came in. quality of life is going to be repaired. What are we doing? What does that mean? You're going to go after all of the quality of life issues. Jumping a turnstile, you're beating $1.50 fare, right? That's what people think. But the reality is, during our tenure, when you took over, probably 45 to 50% of the people that jumped those turnstiles and we grabbed, they were wanted on violent crimes. They were wanted on murders. They were wanted for gun possession. They were wanted on prior felonies. They had warrants, outstanding warrants. Nobody got it except for you. You got it, you understood it, and you made it clear to the commanders.
Well, you understood it also, and you understood it from the street level. I mean, you were there when New York City set records for murder. I think it was 91 and 92, 2,200, 2,400 murders in one year. These are war numbers.
I actually had a footpost as a cop in Midtown South, Times Square, West 42nd Street, between 7th and 8th Avenue. One block.
What year?
87 to 89. Okay?
Okay.
One block, you had 8 foot cops, a sergeant, and a lieutenant on one block. And for 8 hours a day, we ran from one end of that block to the other. Man with a gun, robbery in progress, a stabbing, somebody threw somebody off a building, somebody pushed someone under a train. All day long.
This is Times Square. We're talking about Times Square.
Times Square.
The center of New York. I call it the center of the world.
The center of the universe, right?
That's where the ball comes down.
That's where the ball comes down
every
on New Year's Eve. It was a crime-infested...
Yeah, true.
It was just a sleep. Now, I have to admit, for a cop, if you're an aggressive cop and you like your job, I actually had a blast. I had, I was in uniform at one point.
Right.
I went to plain clothes. I had hair down to the middle of I had hair, period, but it was down to the middle of my back. I had 7
I remember
diamond
pictures
earrings.
of you like that.
Yeah.
I remember pictures of you
so
like that.
we had a blast, but it was completely crime-infested.
People should know that this guy is pure cop. When he was police commissioner, which is really the second most important position in the city, or at least gets the most attention, right? Very distinguished position. He used to make arrests. He'd stop his little entourage. They'd see a robbery or something in progress, and he'd go chase it at them.
I don't know if you remember this, but one morning
I wake up to your making an arrest.
You called me after I briefed you.
And everybody thought I could be
6
angry
o'clock.
at you, and I congratulated you.
And we stopped a guy up in Harlem, wanted for murder, attempted murder, carjacking out of Virginia. You said, "What are you doing?" I said, "That's what cops do, right?"
Yeah.
I was out with my guys.
Great for morale.
Listen,
Unbelievable for morale.
there's no better inspiration for the men and women that work for you than for them to see
that's why you're a natural
that
elite.
you're not going to ask them to do something that you wouldn't do. It's like
when I was U.S.
went
attorney,
up on the bridge.
When I was U.S. attorney, I used to try cases and
exactly.
argue appeals.
Right.
So when I was asking a kid to take on a tough case, well, I tried actually the toughest case.
Right.
That there was a good chance we were going to lose, rather than, one of these. You got 20 tapes and you're a disc jockey.
Right.
When you were up on the bridge, you got to tell that story, because you were probably commissioner about a couple months at this point.
About 3 or 4 months.
It was a beautiful day. It was a Saturday.
Joe Viggiano.
And I was working.
Viggiano, who died on September 11th.
Yeah.
Before he died, he came into my office. I was in the process of promoting him, and he saw a picture of me when I was a young cop in a SWAT team in New Jersey. And he said, "Commissioner, is that you rappelling out of that helicopter and off that building?" I said, "Yeah." He said, every weekend we go up on the George Washington Bridge. On the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah.
He said, "We go up on the Brooklyn Bridge and we go up there to train." He said, "You should come." I said, why would I do that?
Spend your weekend,
he said,
climbing up the Brooklyn
Bridge. He said,
Bridge.
"It's a lot of fun. You'll enjoy it." I said, "No, that's okay." So he was walking out my door, my office, and he turned back and he said, "Listen, Commissioner, we've asked the last 4 or 5 police commissioners. They never have the balls to do it."
Now that did it. I knew my Bernie would immediately say, boom.
I said, "Okay,
I'm going."
Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, I'll be down there.
You'd rather be dead than turn that down.
That's right. And I walked up on the pole of the Brooklyn Bridge.
My uncle took 3 people down my Uncle Rudy took 3 people down from the Brooklyn Bridge. That's why it's so meaningful.
And I'm going to tell you something. I think that's the heroism That's the dedication.
But so you walk up to the top. You walk up to the top of the bridge.
Walk up to the top,
which is quite a hike.
And you called me, and I answered the phone.
I called you to ask.
You sound like you're in a wind tunnel.
Yeah, I called you from my office.
Right.
Which is virtually right below it. I mean, it's very close. People might not know that. Called you from my office to ask you some question or other. Not that important, but whatever it was. And I said, you sound like you're in a wind tunnel.
And I said, if you come out to the steps of City Hall and look up at the top of the Brooklyn Bridge, I'm hanging out right now.
Can you imagine seeing you, if you're the mayor, seeing your police commissioner on the top of the, that's where jumpers go. I mean, I wonder if, Bernie, am I treating you that badly?
I thought it was a good thing at the time. And the cops loved it.
Was it a good thing? To me, it's, I mean, I wrote a book on leadership, and I mean, getting out in front of the troops. I mean, that's what Patton did.
That's right.
That's what MacArthur did.
They need inspiration. They need motivation. They need real leadership. And when you do things that you would ask them to do, and they think, in their mind, they think, you know, he's got me doing this. He would never do it.
Yeah.
You know what? There's nothing I've ever asked.
Well, that's how I think you, in addition to CompStat, which we're going to talk about, and the programs we did, I think the reason you were able to get crime down after Bratton and Safer had brought crime down like 40% or something, or I mean, remarkable numbers that nobody ever believed. And you were able to get it down another 22%. I mean, you got a tremendous reduction in crime while you were police commissioner. People tend to forget that because of 9/11, which, you know, because that was your great achievement.
Right.
But the underlying police commissioner job, I mean, you did superb.
We dropped crime another about 20%. We dropped, for the first time in probably a decade and a half, the response time.
Right.
You know,
which saves lives.
Which saves lives.
Well, think about it. There's a robbery going on, or a burglary, or a holdup in a bar, and something may go wrong. If you can interrupt that right away,
that's right.
You probably prevent a shooting. If you get there a little late. Now, Bernie, I want to ask you this, because most people will not understand this, and maybe we should show the picture right now of the police officer where the water was thrown all over him, the very first one, and he hunches over, and obviously he's just telling the world, this is a police department without morale. Now, tell us the importance of morale to a police officer responding quickly. He gets a call, there's a robbery in progress. Does he rush there? Does he rush in while it's going on? Or does he start thinking, oh, gee, I got a family, I've got a livelihood. If I do anything wrong, the mayor's not going to protect me against the crazies who are going to try to crucify me. Which
you know
they
what,
do.
Mayor? When I watched that video,
how important is that?
When I watched that video, that cop hunched over, basically cowering after they threw the bucket through the water.
I immediately thought of you, and I thought of Brad, and I thought of Safer.
You know what? It's not only about morale, it's about overall leadership of the city. If those men and women in the police department know that they're not going to be supported, they're not going to be indemnified, that the mayor is not going to have their back. You know, I mean, think about this for a second. We had our issues with the police department on the financial end, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, we had issues. You know, you were trying to scrimp for money.
I had no money. I had a gigantic deficit. I had a city that was getting close to bankruptcy, and Dinkins had spent us into oblivion.
Right.
And
but
I had to cut everything. I had to cut the police.
You had to cut the police. However, there isn't a cop that worked under my command, not one, that worked under my command out of 55,000 men and women that work for me that did not know under your command. They got the benefit of the doubt. They were going to be given the benefit of the doubt unless there was an investigation that proved they did something criminal or administratively wrong, and they know that. And I hear about it today, every single day when I'm in the city, when I'm, you know, making stops in the city. Cops will constantly come up to me and thank me for that support that they do not have today.
And that's the factor that I think even with CompStat and all you can't measure that. That's the going beyond what you absolutely have to do.
Right.
Going beyond the call of duty, getting there a little bit faster, walking into a difficult situation, because, you know, God forbid if it turns out wrong, police commissioner's not going to turn on you, the mayor's not going to turn on you. If you made a mistake, he's going to treat it as a mistake, not the worst crime of the century.
I remember my first couple shootings. I had an undercover in Brooklyn that was involved in a shooting, and I was actually going to the scene, and all my executive staff said, "No, Commissioner, you shouldn't go. You got to wait until we find out it's a good shoot, it's not a good shoot." I said, "No, I'm going. We'll find that out later, but I need the men and women that's out there to know that I'm going to support them. Unless they did something criminally wrong, they need to know I'm going to be there for them." And I would show up at those events, at those various events.
Well, you know, one of the things that has gotten revived because of the presidential campaign and Mayor Bloomberg's, I guess, flip-flop, we'd have to call it, on stop. He calls it stop and frisk. We call it stop, question, and frisk.
Right.
And in most of America, the police call it the Terry stop.
Right.
Because it comes from Terry versus the United States.
Right.
So we utilize that. We utilize that, and we utilize that, I think, very effectively. So when we come back from the break, I'd like us to talk about that, because I think it's a very important thing that people don't understand.
Absolutely.
And we'll take a short break, and then we'll be right back with Bernard Kerik. Welcome back to Common Sense with Bernie Kerik. And as I said before the break, we're going to talk about stop and frisk, stop, question, and frisk, Terry stop. Tell us, Commissioner, what that is. What everybody talks about stop and frisk. They say it prevents crimes. They say it's unconstitutional. There are all kinds of.
First of all, the Terry stop was something that came out of a court decision that basically gave police the authority and the ability to stop someone, question them, and if there was reasonable suspicion that they had committed a crime or were in possession of a weapon or something that could harm the cop had the right to pat them down. Now, historically, we hear stop and frisk. It is not stop and frisk in New York City. This is extremely important. It's stop, question, and frisk. As a plainclothes officer, as a uniformed officer, I've stopped and questioned hundreds of people on 42nd Street, in Harlem, Spanish Harlem, Washington Heights. And basically, these are drug-prone locations. This is at a time when the crack epidemic was out of control. Violent crime was out of control. In 1990, we had 2,400 homicides.
2,400 homicides.
2,400.
And when we left,
we were down under about 650.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and then Bloomberg eventually got it down to about 350, right?
About 350.
Yeah.
You know, and how did he get it down? He got it down by continuing.
Well, we're going to talk about that. But not just continuing it, but
he, you know what?
Exponentially.
His problem was that he just went overboard, right?
Well, let's get to that because I don't think people understand that completely. But we did, meaning during my administration, we did stop, question, and frisk for 8 years, and I always think that was the difference in many ways between New York and Chicago. You know, we have the same gun control laws, New York and Chicago,
right?
And they have per capita 3-4 times the murders that we have.
Right.
Because we aggressively go out and take the guns from the bad guys. I always tell people gun control, whether you agree with it or not, has nothing to do with crime because criminals are not controllable. Right? A stick-up man, an organized criminal, a drug dealer, doesn't go get a license.
Right.
So you're controlling legitimate people's behavior. So to bring crime down, particularly when you have shootings, you got to go get the gun.
Right, and where do you go? Here, this is extremely important. Where do you go get the gun? You go to places where the violent crime is the harshest, is the most aggressive.
Now, how do we now, this is another thing that's really, really important. Since you were there, how did we determine where we were going to go? Did we say, oh, we're going to go to black neighborhoods or Hispanic neighborhoods, where Mike gave that impression in that tape that
he basically gave the impression.
Maybe he didn't really understand
go to black neighborhoods. We put black kids on the wall. We search them. We find guns. All right. 1, that's illegal. 2, that's not true. Okay. Basically, what we did is we took a map of New York City,
right,
and we pin mapped those maps. In other words, violent crime, murder, rape, grand larceny, burglary. All the 7 primary crime indicators got pin mapped onto a map wherever the most violent crime was, that's where the saturation of cops was. I don't care what, I don't ask, what color is that community?
Right, of course.
What color are the people that live there? What religion are they? I don't give a damn.
And the reason you know about the numbers of crimes, let's say in the South Bronx, as opposed to the west side of Manhattan, are the people there are reporting the people who are committing the crime and telling you their race. So if it happens to be a black area, the reason there's a lot of, you're finding out about a lot of crime there is black people are calling up and telling you the man who did it is a 6'4" black person or a 6'4" white person or Asian. You're following the stats. And what's that program called?
CompStat.
CompStat. And would you say that CompStat was the key to our being able to reduce crime and also to hold the police department accountable?
It is today, still, nationwide, it is the most substantial program in reducing violent crime in the United States. There's other cities around the country that have implemented it, none as aggressively as we did.
You know, a lot, when I look at that, a lot of them do the statistics right. But I say critical to it is the CompStat meeting every week.
No, but it's beyond that. It's the CompStat meeting, and it's the management.
Yes, of course.
It's the accountability.
Right.
It's me. It's the police commissioner sitting in that room saying, "I want to know what you did, how you did it, why you did it."
When it first started, it caused grown men to faint.
Yeah.
One guy came in drunk. One day, he was totally smashed. He was so nervous the night before. Commander came in. He was slurring his words.
When I was in correction, and I used to do meetings, my team's meetings in correction, they'd be sweating. Tommy Von Essen, the fire commissioner, I took him one time, and the next morning, you asked him. You said, "Well, how'd it go?" He said, "Well, it makes a hell of a difference when they take a 10-minute break and 5 empty seats are in the room and somebody's been fired." Okay, that gives you the ability to hold people accountable for either their successes or their failures. Successes are rewarded, failures are punished. And if you can't do the job, in my opinion, I'm not a big guy on moving failure. So if you can't do the job, you got to go, and I'll get somebody else to do it.
And what CompStat gave you was an objective measure of failure and success, as opposed to the politics. I mean, the police department before, who did you know? Your friend gets promoted,
right,
and then he brings along all his buddies.
Right.
Here, you couldn't do that. If the guy had a bad record, he wasn't going to be brought along.
It was critically monitored.
Right.
Everything was critically monitored, and you can make a determination whether this was a good manager, a good commander, and if he wasn't, he just can't stay there.
Well, you took that program, the CompStat program, which started in the police department. And I think you were the first one. Eventually, 20 other places did it. And you applied it to the corrections department.
Right.
Because before you were police commissioner, you worked your way up in the corrections department to commissioner.
Right.
And just tell us the result in the prison, really. Tell us the result.
When you took over, we had 133,000.
We're talking about Rikers Island. I think people will know Rikers Island.
The worst jail system in the country at the time. We had 133,000 inmate admissions a year. We averaged 150 stabbings and slashings per month. We had about $112 million a year overtime bill. And in the 6 years I was there as first deputy and commissioner, we dropped inmate on inmate violence by 93%. We dropped overtime spending by 60%. We dropped staff assaults by 40%.
This is why you became police commissioner,
I would think. I would think. Exactly.
You understood. Look, not everybody understands CompStat.
Right.
I mean, we tried to teach it in different departments, and some of them got it, some of them didn't get it.
Right.
And now in private life, you and I have done this. We teach other police departments.
Right.
Some of them get it, some don't get it. You were someone who intuitively got it.
Right.
Were able to apply it to corrections. That helped the city because then we applied it every place else.
We did health and hospitals.
We got children
covered. We did
covered.
transportation.
We did it for Child Health Care Plus.
Right.
We went and figured out where are the children that need to be covered.
Exactly.
We put it on a pin map and we went and found them. But the point that I want to make, the connection between stop, question, and frisk and CompStat is that CompStat makes sure that your stop, question, and frisk is colorless.
That's right.
It has no, and what I feel bad about is, among other things, Bloomberg never made that point. But I know Ray Kelly understood CompStat, but I don't know if Mike ever really understood CompStat.
No, I don't think he understood it neither, based on his description. Based on the fact that he has now stood publicly and said, I disagree. Really? You disagree? For 12 years, you were in the position as mayor. You supported it, enormously supported it. You indemnified it. Even 3 years after
he argued
that,
in court for it.
Argued in court. And all of a sudden... now
he
he's
had me
running for
file a
mayor.
supporting affidavit.
Right. And now he's going to run for president, and all of a sudden, oh, it was a bad idea. No, it wasn't a bad idea.
But what
you
did he-
abused it, but that was a bad
Well,
idea.
explain, you were the last police commissioner the last year.
Under you.
Right. So we were going to be sued by the Justice Department.
Right.
The Eastern District of New York had actually prepared it,
Right.
and were ready to sue us.
Yep.
And I asked for a meeting with Janet Reno and Eric Holder.
3 days into my new job as police commissioner, we got on a train and went down to Washington, D.C. We met with Janet Reno. We met with Eric Holder, who was the Deputy Attorney General at the time.
And very active in the meeting, very involved in it. you know.
Right. And we basically showed them our stats on how we were operating. There was nothing they could say. There was no, it wasn't racist. It wasn't based on race.
It was based on the complaints that we got,
Right.
then put into a computer, separated as to where. So basically, the people in New York were telling us where we should be policing,
Right.
as opposed to politics, making people happy, or whatever reason, some
Right.
predetermined. It's basically the people in New York were calling out to us and saying, come here, we got a lot of crime here.
Right.
We got a lot of crime here. Not go after black people, go after white people, go after...
Mayor, I just want to key on this for a second, because remember you used to do town hall meetings, right? We'd go to a town hall.
One a month.
One a month, yeah. It was
You loved it,
torture. No, yeah. But at these
I
town
love
hall
them.
meetings, you would get somebody to stand up and say, we need foot cops in my neighborhood.
Oh.
And I would be able to look at their specific neighborhood and tell them, there's no crime in your neighborhood. But 6 blocks away, there's a lot of active crime. You don't really need 2 cops on a foot post.
We took
They need them.
We took police officers away from the areas basically that voted for me,
Right.
and put them in the areas where maybe I got 10% of the vote. Didn't matter. I
Yeah.
never even. Somebody said that about 4 years into it, 5 years into it. One of the Republican leaders said, "You're really crazy. I mean, you've cut in half the number of police in the areas where that's your base, and you put them elsewhere." I said, "Well, I don't have a base.
Right.
My base is a city."
Yeah, but you know what? Here's the reality. And this is what people tend to, they don't understand. The biggest benefactors, the most substantial benefactors of crime reduction, violent crime and murder in New York City were the black communities. Our overall average was a 65% reduction in violent crime and a 70% reduction in homicide. But in areas like Bed-Stuy, there was an 80% reduction in homicide.
Because that's where the concentration was.
Because that's where
and
the
almost
concentration
invariably, and this is just a statistic. This is not racist. This is not. And if you don't understand the statistic and operate on it, then you are a racist.
Right.
And you get a lot of black people killed. Virtually every year, no matter if there were 2,400 murders or 300 murders, about 70% of the murders are African American.
Right.
And it's African American on African American.
Exactly.
About 80% of the time. If you don't address that, and you leave those murders happening because it's
That's
racist,
racist.
that's the worst kind of. That's letting people die.
Right.
It's letting people die because of some kind of a ridiculous, unfounded theory. I never got that. So the other point I want you to make is, because I think this also helped in Holder and Reno, basically saying our program was constitutional.
Right.
What was the largest number of stops that we did in a year?
About 90,000. We averaged about 90,000.
And what did Bloomberg take it to?
550,
I think almost.
600,000.
I think 650.
650.
650,000. And what did we do? What did we do to make sure that each one of those was justified in terms of the paperwork and the? I mean, this isn't something
If
you
you
just
recall,
do. You got. There's a
you-
constitutional procedure. I also thought they didn't respect enough the constitutional privacy that's involved,
Right.
and what you're invading. So you better have a good record.
Right. And if you recall, one of the reasons that Eric Holder and Janet Reno basically said, okay, I think they're okay, I think this is good, is because we got extremely transparent. We gave them access to all our CompStat records. We gave them access to all the command records. We gave them access to every stop, question, and frisk notification, unlike anybody else before us.
Right.
And when you look at that data, the data is what it is. And they got it. They understood it. And that's why they chose not to move forward with the lawsuit.
And then at 650, the solution rate, or the rate on which they got a gun or drugs, was down to 5%.
Right.
Which means 95% of the people who were searched had nothing on them. You're going to leave a lot of angry people behind.
You leave a lot of angry people behind, and you're also doing something that really is borderline illegal.
Yeah.
Illegal searches.
So what you would advocate for the city, or any city, like Chicago, to reduce gun crime, is a stop, question, and frisk that is conducted by strict Terry principles. In other
Terry
words,
principles.
the police officer has to have reasonable suspicion. He has to record it. I see a bulge.
Right.
I see a guy looking at doors at the way, in my experience, burglars look at doors.
Right.
I see a guy being abusive toward a woman. Some reasonable
And
suspicion.
taking that,
And writing it down, keeping it a record.
taking that with an overlay of the CompStat complaints. What are the 911 calls telling us?
Right.
The 911 calls are telling us this one area is saturated with violent crime, burglaries, robberies, rapes, whatever the case may be. When you take that and you look at your stop and frisk material, it better match.
Right.
And that's how you can hold the commanders accountable.
So we began with the question of morale and the police officer who was hit by the water and submitted to it, and then nothing really was done. I don't think those people were ever arrested, if I recall.
I think they were arrested later, sometime later.
Someone was arrested for it, and then there were other incidents that followed it.
Right.
And now we have a police department that virtually openly disrespects the mayor.
Right.
How does that affect the police commissioner?
It's a
I
major
mean-
it's a major negative impact on the police commissioner. Look, I don't know Dermot Shea, the police commissioner now. I don't really know him.
He seems like a professional.
He was a captain or a deputy inspector when I was police commissioner 20 years ago. However, I think he's a consummate professional. I think he's got the experience needed to do the job.
I feel sorry for him.
But he works for a mayor that is not a real leader. He works for a mayor that is not supportive of his own department. And you can get up at a press conference and say, "Oh, I support the NYPD," as the mayor. But I go by his actions. When Governor Cuomo was paroling cop killers from prison, where was de Blasio? Where was he? He should have been screaming.
Agreeing with it.
He should have been screaming at the top of his lungs, "You cannot do this." There's a number of things that he should have done and should be doing to support his men and women, and he doesn't do it.
And I think the point we will end with is this is not just stroking the police and making them feel good. And I think I know this because I come from a family of 4 cops and a firefighter. I was very close to my uncle.
Right.
And you knew my uncle.
Yep.
He was my hero. It actually plays a role in how efficiently they enforce the law.
That's right.
And how quickly they enforce the law. And how many risks they're willing to take. Because in order to really reduce crime, you got to take risks.
Right.
You got to walk into a situation where, God Almighty, you may get killed, or you may kill somebody. And
Listen,
that's what violent crime's about.
This day and age, police officers, they want leadership. that, you know, when a commander or a police commissioner or a chief says charge, they want to be able to follow that person and know that no matter what happens, they're going to be supported, indemnified, and taken care of. And they just don't have that because of the mayor. Not because of the police commissioner, because of the mayor.
And if you look at our old cities where there's a heavy amount of crime, a great deal of deterioration, I mean, a lot of them, New York may be the symbol, but a lot of them are suffering from the same problem.
Exactly the same
Baltimore,
problem.
look at Baltimore.
And it's never going to get
Chicago.
fixed. It's never going to get fixed. Never in 100 years. You can say it's socioeconomic. You could say we need jobs. You could say we need schools. Bottom line is, as long as they have violent crime and they have murder rates like they do, nobody is going to build businesses, open schools, go to visit,
and the mayor has to be the one to make it clear, because look, in Chicago, in Newark, they hired some really good people as police commissioners at different times. But if a police officer knows that the mayor could turn his back on him, he's the political leader. He's the one that either allows all these people to ruin the reputation of the cop and build a whole community against him, or fights back to say, at least the cop should be given the benefit of the doubt, and let's quiet down and shut up before we have a trial. I mean, we had a very famous case in which we had demonstrations for weeks and weeks and weeks. People went to jail stupidly. Jesse Jackson actually called up Howard Safer and asked for a scheduled arrest. And Howard said, "What should I do?" I said, "Tell Jesse we don't schedule arrests. We'll arrest him when we want to." And it turned out the police officers were acquitted by a jury with 4 black people on the jury. Acquitted.
Not only acquitted,
they wanted me to.
They were acquitted in a state trial, they were acquitted in a federal trial, and they were acquitted in the trial room in the police department.
Yeah, and I want to make a point that there were African Americans on the jury. And an acquittal is unanimous. Well, Commissioner, I neglected on purpose to go over one subject because first of all, I want to cover this condition, which I think is a very relevant one right now. And a lot of cities need to know about this so they don't follow the example of de Blasio. But a big part of your career is September 11. And I want to devote just a special interview to that. And I want to tell people that this man saved my life. And he saved the life of a lot of other people on September 11. We were stuck in a building. We were stuck in a building for 20 to 30 minutes. The governor thought we were dead. And he was like a rock, and he helped me to be a rock.
It was a team.
I would look at him and I'd say, I'm not going to be afraid. He's not afraid. Bernie, I love you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, we're shaking hands. Thank you, and we'll be back with our next episode, and we hope you enjoyed this one, and you will subscribe to Rudy Giuliani, Common Sense. Thank you.
Please subscribe to our backup channels, Net4Truth USA 2 Patriot channel, BitChute.com/net4Truth USA, and drop.space/ Net4Truth USA. We fly so close to the target, we are on our 5th fighter jet. We will be relentless and persistent until the enemies of freedom are defeated. You can support this channel by using the links in the description, but for a $100 donation, I will personally send you a autographed hardcover special edition copy of Land of Childhood's Fears. Also, visit my bookstore at lulu.com/Net4Truth USA. If you are viewing this video on BitChute, you can use the links in the description to support us, or simply click the green $ dot on our video to support this channel. Thank you. Links are in the description section.